Have you ever heard of a war started by a football game? In the summer of 1969, El Salvador and Honduras went to war just weeks after a series of World Cup qualifying matches. This conflict is famously known as the Football War, or more accurately, the 100-Hour War. But was it really about football? Or was the beautiful game just the spark that lit a much larger powder keg? To understand this conflict, we need to go back in time. For decades, the border between El Salvador and Honduras was poorly defined, leading to ongoing disputes. More importantly, economic and social pressures were building up. El Salvador, the smallest and most densely populated country in Central America, was facing a severe land crisis. A small elite owned most of the fertile land, leaving hundreds of thousands of Salvadoran peasants landless and in poverty. Many of these landless Salvadorans saw a lifeline just across the border in Honduras. Honduras was much larger and less populated, with plenty of available land. Starting in the early 20th century, a steady stream of Salvadoran migrants moved into Honduras, seeking work and a place to call their own. By the late 1960s, over 300,000 Salvadorans were living there, making up a significant portion of the rural population. They were hardworking and revitalized many parts of the Honduran economy. However, this created a new set of problems. In Honduras, just like in El Salvador, a powerful landowning class controlled the country. As the Honduran peasantry also began demanding land reform, the government found a convenient scapegoat: the Salvadoran immigrants. The Honduran media began painting the Salvadorans as invaders, stealing land and jobs from native Hondurans. Tensions escalated dramatically. In 1969, Honduras passed a new land reform law that effectively targeted the Salvadoran settlers. The law redistributed land owned by Salvadorans to native-born Hondurans, forcing thousands of Salvadoran families to flee their homes, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Stories of violence and persecution filled the Salvadoran press, creating a wave of anti-Honduran sentiment back in El Salvador. The situation was a ticking time bomb. And then came the football matches. In June 1969, El Salvador and Honduras were set to play a 3-game series to qualify for the 1970 World Cup. This wasn't just any game. It was a stage for national pride and simmering resentments. The first game was in the Honduran capital, Tegucigalpa. The Salvadoran team was harassed all night before the match, with loud noises and disturbances outside their hotel. Unsurprisingly, a rattled El Salvador lost 1-0. The home crowd was ecstatic, but back in El Salvador, the loss was seen as a national humiliation. A week later, it was Honduras's turn to play in San Salvador. The reception was even more hostile. The Honduran team faced similar intimidation tactics. The Honduran flag was burned, and the atmosphere was incredibly tense. This time, El Salvador won decisively, 3-0. The victory was celebrated wildly, but the violence against visiting Honduran fans was severe, leading to escalating the diplomatic crisis. With the series tied, a final playoff match was scheduled on neutral ground in Mexico City. The entire region held its breath. The game was a nail-biter. It went into extra time. And with just a few minutes left, El Salvador's Pipo Rodriguez scored the winning goal. El Salvador was going to the World Cup. Back home, the country erupted in celebration. But this football victory was the final push. The same day El Salvador won, it broke off diplomatic relations with Honduras, citing the persecution of its citizens. Just under 3 weeks later, on July 14, 1969, the Salvadoran military launched a full-scale invasion of Honduras. The Salvadoran Air Force bombed Honduran airports, and ground troops advanced across the border. The initial assault was successful, as Salvadoran forces pushed deep into Honduran territory, catching the Honduran army by surprise. However, the war quickly turned into a stalemate. The Salvadoran army had overstretched its supply lines, and the Honduran Air Force, though smaller, proved surprisingly effective at striking back. The Organization of American States, the OAS, urgently intervened, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Under immense international pressure, and with both armies exhausted, a ceasefire was agreed upon after just 4 days of fighting, roughly 100 hours. By early August, Salvadoran troops had withdrawn from Honduras. The war was short, but its consequences were devastating. An estimated 3,000 people, mostly civilians, were killed. The conflict displaced tens of thousands more. Over 100,000 Salvadoran refugees flooded back into El Salvador, a country already struggling with overpopulation and land shortages. This massive influx of displaced and impoverished people placed an unbearable strain on El Salvador's social and political fabric. The war shattered the Central American Common Market, a regional trade bloc that had been beneficial for both economies. Decades of progress towards regional integration were wiped out overnight. For Honduras, the war solidified a sense of national identity, but the economic fallout was severe. For El Salvador, the consequences were even more catastrophic. The government was unable to cope with the returning refugees. Social unrest skyrocketed. The failed promises of land reform and the economic crisis created a fertile ground for radicalization. Many historians argue that the unresolved tensions from the football war were a direct catalyst for the bloody Salvadoran Civil War, which erupted a decade later and lasted for 12 years. So, was it really a football war? Not at all. The football matches were simply the final, public spectacle in a long-running drama of land disputes, immigration, nationalism, and social inequality. The games provided the emotional fuel and the nationalist fervor that pushed two already hostile nations over the brink. The real causes were deep-seated issues that have been ignored by the ruling elites of both countries for far too long. The football war serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes, the games we play are a reflection of the much more serious conflicts brewing just beneath the surface. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. See you next time.